Ryan Newman is officially returning to NASCAR. Carl Eggers will join the Fox Sports booth at Darlington, and we're talking more about the post-race fight that happened between Noah Gragson and Ross Chastain. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead by starting to talk about all the throwbacks that have been revealed over the last couple days, as since Friday, there's been a lot of throwbacks that have been revealed for this weekend's throwback race. The first throwback we're looking at is Chase Elliott's throwback to Bill Elliott's 2002 Brickyard 400 scheme. This looks absolutely incredible. One of my favorite throwbacks so far. It looks simplistic, but looks absolutely incredible. And maybe we'll see this car in victory lane at Darlington this weekend. It looks really awesome, to be honest with you. The next throwback we're looking at is Dean Thompson's Herman Quiroga's scheme that we're going to see at the throwback weekend. This looks amazing, looks incredible, and I think Tricon Garage did a really good job. The next throwback we're looking at is Harrison Burton's throwback to Jeff Burton's 1999 scheme. Great job by Wood Brothers. They've done a lot of throwbacks to, of course, his father, but this looks really good. The next throwback we're looking at is Ryan Varg's throwback to Sean Woodside. This looks good in my opinion. I think On Point Motorsports did a good job. I'm glad to see the Ryan Vargs get another opportunity back in the Truck Series. The next throwback we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's Foxback to the Red Horse schemes. Like a tribute to the Red Horse cars. It looks really good and looks very awesome. The next throwback we're looking at is Tanner Gray's throwback, Foxback, I should say, to Red Horse Racing. Looks good, looks simplistic, looks creative. The next throwback we're looking at is Taylor Gray's throwback to Todd Bodine's scheme when he drove for Red Horse Racing. Red Horse, really good looking scheme. Tricon's really embracing the Red Horse this weekend, and honestly, this looks really awesome. The next throwback we're looking at is Josh Williams' throwback to Kevin Harvick. This looks absolutely amazing, looks absolutely incredible, and they did a perfect job on this paint scheme. It seems like some of the smaller teams in Xfinity and Cup and Trucks have done a much better job than some of the bigger teams, but this looks really awesome. The next throwback we're taking a look at is Todd Gilliland's throwback to Elton Sawyer's Barbasol scheme from the 1990s. Front Row did a great job on this one, in my opinion. Very similar colors, looks amazing, looks awesome. Excited to see it out on the racetrack at Darlington. The next throwback we're taking a look at, which was revealed this morning, is Austin Hill's throwback to Kevin Harvick's 2006 Xfinity Championship scheme. Great, fantastic, similar colors, looks really awesome. And the final throwback we're taking a look at is Sheldon Creed's throwback to Kevin Harvick's 2001 Xfinity Series Championship scheme. Absolutely perfect. My favorite throwbacks so far that have been revealed, and I'm glad to see that RSR is doing a tribute to that because it looks really awesome and it looks absolutely incredible. Great job by them, in my honest opinion, absolutely incredible. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the Kansas Cup Series race. Yesterday, we saw a very competitive NASCAR Cup Series race at Kansas Speedway. So much to the fact that we had the most lead changes in Kansas Cup race history with 37 lead changes, which, like I said, is the most lead changes in a Cup race at Kansas Speedway. In fact, I believe it is the most lead changes in a race that's not at a super speedway since 2011 Coca-Cola 600. Yesterday's Cup race was absolutely amazing and absolutely incredible, and it had everything you pretty much could ask for in a NASCAR Cup Series race. And the drivers, in my opinion, did an absolutely fantastic job and an incredible job. I loved it. It was amazing. It was incredible. And I absolutely loved the race yesterday because it was absolutely fantastic. And I think the drivers put on a fantastic show, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Joe Gibbs Racing. With Denny Hamlin winning the NASCAR Cup Series race yesterday, Denny Hamlin got Joe Gibbs Racing their 400th win in their Cup Series history as an organization since they started back in 1993, which was 1992 or 1991, I should say, which is a little over 30 years ago. Just massively congratulations, Joe Gibbs Racing, all the history, all their wins in the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series. It's just amazing to see all the success that Joe Gibbs Racing has had in their time, and absolutely well-deserved for them. Yes, the win yesterday they got was extremely controversial, but honestly, it was still fantastic racing nonetheless, and I enjoyed it, and glad to see that they were able to make history getting their 400th win, which I think is the most in any organization, so congratulations to them on getting that done. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch and Kyle Busch. Now, we'll be talking about both drivers here later in this episode, but a big thing happened on Friday as both were officially added to the top 75 greatest NASCAR drivers of all time. Probably the most successful duo of brothers. Both of them won NASCAR Cup Series championships and have both won many races in their time. Kurt Busch, 2004 NASCAR Cup Series champion, and Kyle Busch, a two-time Cup Series champion, and of course 2009 NASCAR Xfinity Series champion, and the winningest driver in Xfinity and Truck Series history. Both drivers definitely deserve the right to be in the top 75 greatest drivers, the top 50 for sure, and both of them have earned the right to get into the list. So congratulations to both of them on making it into the top 75 drivers, because they absolutely earned the right to make the list, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain. As it was announced on Friday evening that Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain will compete in the Cars Late Model Tour race at North Wilkesboro on May 17th. So a little under 2 weeks from today, they will be competing in the Cars Late Model Tour race. They will join drivers like Kevin Harvick and Dale Jr. and Carson Osbar, who are going to be competing in that race as well. It's great to see a lot of Cup drivers are competing in that event. It's an invitational event, so I would not be surprised or shocked if you see drivers like Kyle Busch potentially, Kyle Larson. We know that Chase Briscoe is going to be competing in that Cars Late Model Tour race. It's just going to be really fun to have a lot of Cup drivers and other drivers from other ranks coming over and racing in the Cars Late Model Tour race, but it's really awesome nonetheless to see that they're both going to be competing in the Cars Late Model Tour race. I'm absolutely looking forward to that, and it's going to be really, really exciting. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Hailie Deegan and Tony Breidinger, as both of them finished in the top 15 in the Truck Series race at Kansas. Hailie Deegan ended up finishing 12th, and Tony Breidinger ended up finishing 15th in her debut. That is the first time that two female drivers have finished in the top 15 in a NASCAR top-tier touring series race. Hailie Deegan, she had a pretty strong truck, in my opinion. Probably had a top 10 truck a lot of the evening. Had her best run overall this season. Yes, she did finish in the top 10 at Texas Motor Speedway, but that was due to a lot of attrition that happened in the race. Tony Breidinger, while she struggled at the beginning of the race, the more reps she had, the better that she got. And I think both drivers overall did a very, very strong job in the Truck Series race on Saturday evening. And both of them were up front somewhat. Tony Breidinger, yes, she did finish top 15, which again is pretty good. I know it's a Tri-Car Garage truck, but it was her debut. So to finish top 15 in her debut is pretty good in my opinion. And Hailie Deegan, I feel like that she's getting better with the Thor Sport truck. She's had some good speed this year, and she was, like I said, contending for a top 10 overall in the event. Nonetheless, so congratulations to both drivers on making history there, and both of them have earned a right to be called really good drivers in the sport. Congratulations to both of them on finishing the top 15. They absolutely did a really good job, and good job for both of them to get top 15s. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ross Chastain. Now, we're going to be talking about Ross Chastain a lot in this episode for many reasons. But first is that Ross Chastain, after the Cup Series race, went to victory lane and congratulated Denny Hamlin on winning the Cup Series race. That's pretty cool to see, considering the fact that Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain have had a history over the last year that goes all the way back to basically Gateway, and they both had a lot of contact and issues with each other really in the last year. So it's really good to see both drivers basically end up having a truce, and it's good to see that Ross Chastain congratulated Denny Hamlin on picking up the victory. That's pretty awesome to see nonetheless, and I'm glad to see that both of them were able to kind of settle the differences and congratulate each other on having great runs, and good to see Ross congratulate Denny Hamlin on the victory. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Gunther Steiner. Now, Gunther Steiner has been some NASCAR broadcasts in the past and has worked in NASCAR, but of course he is the Haas F1 team principal. And Gunther Steiner basically told the media, he says that F1 can eventually be the most dominant motorsport in the U.S., especially with the growth. I have to completely disagree with Gunther Steiner here, and I'll explain for many, many reasons. While yes, Formula 1 is definitely growing in the United States in a pretty big way, the racing product is going to be huge. And I think eventually the F1 is going to lose a lot of their fans. Why? The racing product is not that good. And we've known that the F1 racing product isn't that good. Yes, it's got the glimpse, the glimmer, and the fashion, all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't have the great racing product. And I think the most important thing is your racing product. If your racing product is not good, eventually people are just going to get turned away and turned off by watching, and they're eventually just going to stop watching the sport overall. And eventually maybe they'll come over and watch NASCAR, because the race, especially yesterday for Cup, was way better than what we saw in Formula One. So I really don't agree with Gunther Steiner. Again, Formula One is growing in the United States right now, but a lot of fans have been complaining. We saw on social media yesterday people saying it was boring. It was just a terrible race yesterday. And F1's had some good races, but generally this year, I don't think any of the races in Formula One have been good at all this year. They just have not been good. And NASCAR has outclassed Formula One, and IndyCar has also outclassed Formula One this year as well. So I don't completely agree with Gunther Steiner. I know Formula One is growing in the United States right now, and if they make some moves to help, it could help Formula One, but I don't agree with the fact. I think Gunther Steiner is wrong in this situation, but that is just my honest opinion on that. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ward Burton. Now, Bill Davis was on the Dale Jr. Down very recently, kind of talking about the situation happened between Ward Burton and Bill Davis. Well, Ward Burton went on social media and responded, and he basically laughed about it, and he's called out Bill Davis. I'm not sure what really happened between Ward Burton and Bill Davis. Apparently some stuff really happened between the two of them, but it's interesting to hear the fact that Ward Burton is calling out Bill Davis right here. I would love to see Ward Burton get on the Dale Jr. down. I know the Dale Jr. and Ward Burton have had a history in the past, but it'd be really cool to see Ward Burton get on the Dale Jr. down and kind of talk about what really happened between Bill Davis and him and how things kind of ended. But it's definitely interesting nonetheless to see that Ward Burton is calling out Bill Davis for the incident that happened there. Apparently something happened between the two of them, and nonetheless, I'd definitely like to see them basically kind of talk about it and what really ended up happening and what's true and what's not true. I like to see a little bit of history and see what ended up happening. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Austin Dillon. Now, we're talking about Austin Dillon because of the splitter rod and from the appeal. Remember, Austin Dillon this past week had his appeal on Tuesday, and Austin Dillon ended up losing his appeal, meaning that he still loses 60 points and had that L1 penalty for messing with the splitter rod. And NASCAR is finally starting to go ahead and display the parts like they said they were going to do. Now, why are they doing this? Well, for transparency's sake. NASCAR, after the whole Hendrick Motorsports situation and the call penalties and all that kind of stuff, NASCAR made a decision to go ahead and start displaying the confiscated parts at the racetrack like they used to do back in the 1980s and the 1990s and the early 2000s as well. This is really awesome and really great to see, because one of the key things that we wanted to see as fans is transparency in the sport. One of the biggest issues that we've seen in NASCAR, especially over the last few years, is the lack of transparency. So them displaying the parts and the confiscated parts, I think is a really good way to basically be transparent with your fans. So I think this is a fantastic decision from NASCAR's part, and I love the fact that they're wanting to be transparent with their fans. I think this is a fantastic thing that they've done. This is a fantastic thing they decided to do, and really awesome to see that they are displaying the parts to the fans. This is a fantastic and a great decision, in my honest opinion. I love that they are doing this. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about GMS Racing. Now, while GMS Racing was leading the NASCAR Truck Series race with Grant Enfinger, and Roger Kroof was having a very strong run. We'll get into Roger Kroof here later in this episode. Basically, Bob Pockers put out a tweet saying that the future of the program is uncertain with the move to Toyota. Obviously, GMS Racing is owned by Maury Gallagher, and we know the Legacy Motor Club is going to be switching to Toyota in 2024. Now, it's not so much the fact that the team's future is uncertain. They likely will be potentially a Toyota team in 2024. Even though GMS Racing and Legacy Motor Club are two separate identities, there's still a very strong chance that GMS Racing will be a Toyota team in 2024. There's a lot of uncertainty because of Daniel Dye and Roger Kroof. Both drivers are part of the Chevy development program. So there's a potential possibility both Roger Kroof and Daniel Dye will be looking for different rides in 2024. I think Roger Kroof likely will either end up at Rev Racing in a second Rev Racing truck next year, which will have KBM support, or Roger is going to end up at KBM in 2024. And that would be a really good move for Roger, because KBM has been really fast this year with both Jack Wood and Chase Purdy has shown some really strong speed so far this season. And, of course, Daniel Dye will probably end up either Rev Racing or another organization in the Chevy pipeline next year. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to what happens at GMS Racing. There's definitely a lot of uncertainty going on at the moment right now. And nonetheless, it's going to be very interesting to watch and see what happens when it comes to GMS Racing, because there's a lot of uncertainty right now with that team right now. And it will be very interesting to see what happens. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Miami Grand Prix that happened yesterday. Well, the Miami Grand Prix is basically dominated by two drivers. There was no major incidents that happened out on the racetrack. Sergio Perez dominated the early portion of the race, but eventually Max Verstappen got by Sergio Perez. Then he lost sleep for about 1 or 2 laps, and then Max Verstappen made the pass, and Max Verstappen came off the corner in Miami and picked up, I believe, his third Formula One win of the season and his 38th career Formula One victory. Red Bull's won every single race so far this season, which is nothing new at this point. It seems like Red Bull's probably going to win every single race in 2023, and Max Verstappen's likely going to get his third Formula One championship. Congratulations to Max Verstappen on picking up the victory in Formula One. Pretty boring race. Interesting, there were no retirements, no major issues out on the track, and no safety cars. Not even a virtual safety car ended up happening. Not a very entertaining race, just kind of boring in my opinion. And nonetheless, congratulations to Max Verstappen on picking up the victory in Formula One at Miami. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Matt DiBenedetto. Now, a lot of drivers basically involved in a wreck that happened in the late stages of the NASCAR Truck Series race that happened at Kansas Speedway. And Matt DiBenedetto basically spoke about the wreck. Basically, he said it was a racing deal that ended up happening. He said if he would have chosen to do something a little bit different, he probably would have gone and done it. So Matt DiBenedetto kind of put a little bit of a late block on Christian Eckes. Christian Eckes was to his inside, and Matt DiBenedetto put a late block on Christian Eckes. And unfortunately, it ended up causing a pretty big accident that took out Christian Eckes, Dean Thompson, Chase Purdy, who ran into the side of Christian Eckes, and also Carson Osbar was involved in that crash as well. When I look at the incident, you got to blame Matt DiBenedetto. DiBenedetto did not need to be that aggressive, especially, yes, I know it's kind of really, you want to hold on because you never know if that's going to be the last caution or not. But he basically took himself out and a bunch of drivers out of competition. It's extremely disappointing. And it sucks because I really do like Matt DiBenedetto. I think Matt DiBenedetto has a lot of talent and knows how to get it done behind the wheel of a race car or truck for that matter. Unfortunately, though, for Matt DiBenedetto, he just made a mistake, but Christian Eckes is also a little bit at fault, too, because he was a little bit aggressive. He had been struggling a lot of the night and a lot of the evening and had been struggling a lot of the race. Again, to me, it was just a racing deal situation. Matt DiBenedetto should know a little bit better. He's a racing veteran. He's been racing for many, many years, really almost for 15 years now at this particular point. So he should know a little bit better. That being said, I can't disrespect the aggression, though. I expected him to be a little bit aggressive in that situation, and nonetheless, not surprised to see the aggression there, but just very interesting to see how aggressive he was in the race and how he ended up causing a pretty big accident. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. Now, Martin Truex Jr.'s future past 2023 is kind of uncertain at the moment. Bob Poggers asked Martin Truex Jr. about that because Martin Truex Jr., of course, picked up his first win in nearly 2 years about a week ago on Monday at Dover International Speedway, picking up a pretty big victory, locking his way into the playoffs. Well, Martin Truex Jr. basically says that his win at Dover doesn't have a ripple effect on if he's going to return in 2024 or not. Obviously, Joe Gibbs would love to have Martin Truex Jr. return in 2024, and they're trying to convince Martin Truex Jr. to return to the team in 2024. And you look at the results the last 2 weeks, especially for Martin Truex Jr., I think Martin Truex Jr. is starting to become a championship threat and contender. And even though Martin Truex Jr.'s form is like it being a year kind of fell off, he's like starting to really show up over the last few weeks. And I would definitely love to see Martin Truex Jr. come back in 2024 for major reasons. It keeps that stability around. It sounds like Denny Hamlin, he's getting close to signing an extension with Joe Gibbs Racing for 2023 and 24, and also 23-11. They're working on their extensions currently at the moment as well. But overall, if I'm Joe Gibbs Racing, I want to try to have all my drivers return next year, especially the veterans, because it gives drivers like Christopher Bell and Ty Gibbs another year of experience to have the veterans around, because they're going to be starting basically from scratch, and they're going to be in a similar position to SHR, and they're also going to be very similar position to what Hendrick Motorsports was with all younger drivers, though Christopher Bell will be, I believe, 30 years old or 29 at the end of this season. It's going to be very interesting to see what ends up happening in regards to that when it comes to Martin Truex Jr.'s future. But if I'm Joe Gibbs Racing, I'm trying to convince Martin Truex Jr. to stick around long term. Hopefully, he decides to stick around a longer term. Hopefully, he decides to stick around. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ty Majeski and Roger Crew. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Truck Series race, Roger Croup was having a career night, and he was battling Ty Majeski for third place out on the racetrack and basically second place of the guys on fresh tires because Matt DiBenedetto was ahead, who was on older tires, and of course you had the lead being handled, I believe, by Grant Enfinger at the time. Well, Ty Majeski and Roger Croup had a crash. Rod is putting a couple blocks on with about 60 laps to go, and unfortunately, Roger Croup put a little bit of too late of a block, and unfortunately, Ty Majeski clipped him down the straightaway, and both had a ton of damage. Unfortunately, Roger Croup's night came to an end. Roger Croup was interviewed by the media and was not very happy about it, basically saying, I'll keep that one in the memory bank. After the Truck Series race, both Ty Majeski and Roger Croup had a conversation. It was a calm conversation, and Ty Majeski basically kind of said that Roger needs to basically learn not to make those kind of blocks, but wasn't really bashing him, basically speaking. In the media, he says Roger has a lot of talent, and he does have a lot of respect for Roger, and Roger's going to get more opportunities like this going forward. First of all, I have to say one thing. I do appreciate Ty Majeski for not going and bashing Roger, basically saying he's got a lot of talent and praising him quite a bit. And I think Roger, over time, he did make a mistake out on the racetrack, and you do have to blame Roger Croup for the mistake on track because Roger was having his best truck race he had ever had. He'd been running top 10 all night and top 5 all evening and was potentially going to have a shot at competing against Grant Enfinger for the victory because I think he had a good enough truck to compete for the win. And he took himself out, unfortunately, by being a little bit over-aggressive. He's going to get more opportunities like this. He's a talented driver. He knows what he's doing behind the wheel, and he's going to get more shots and more opportunities to be competitive like this. So I hope he continues to get more opportunities because, like I said, he's got a lot of talent. And like I said, I appreciate Majeski for not bashing because he easily could have bashed him, but he didn't. And I have to respect Majeski for not going on a bashing spree and trying to bash him because he could have easily done that. And in my opinion, he didn't do that. He was respectful. He was right on that. And again, I think that he's going to learn a lot as a driver, and he's going to learn more time and time again. And he's going to learn how to be more respectful out on the track and not race so aggressive. Nonetheless, though, I do appreciate the fact that he wasn't really bashing him. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ross Chastain and Kyle Larson. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Cup Series race at Dover, Ross Chastain made a little bit of an over-aggressive move on Brennan Poole. Unfortunately, he turned Brennan Poole up in the wall, and Kyle Larson was unfortunately collected. Ross Chastain was asked by the media if he had spoken to Kyle Larson on the incident, and Ross Chastain basically said he had not talked to Kyle Larson in regards to the incident. He said he reached out to Brennan Poole and apologized to Rick Ware Racing, but he had not reached out to Kyle Larson. Then on Saturday, Kyle Larson basically spoke to me. Basically, a lot of people noticed the watermelon in the background. I think Larson had been playing jokes right there, and Kyle Larson said he had moved on from the incident. As much as people crap on Kyle Larson as aggressiveness, Kyle Larson is generally a really, really fair driver. And yes, he kind of tried to retaliate against Ross Chastain by basically blocking Ross Chastain. And to me, that was a racing deal right there and a little bit of frustration and kind of a little bit of payback on Kyle Larson's part on Ross Chastain. But still, Ross Chastain almost still end up winning the Dover Cup race regardless. But in my opinion, I have to respect Kyle Larson a lot for just trying to move on and not bashing Ross Chastain. And yes, he was not happy with Ross Chastain in that situation, in that instance. Most frustrated I've seen Kyle Larson. But again, I do appreciate Kyle Larson moving on to the next race and just focusing on trying to be as competitive as possible because you don't want that basically hanging over your head. And we know a lot of drivers have been frustrated with Ross Chastain over the last few weeks, and really the last year and a half, I should say, because he's been the main character over the last year or two. But nonetheless, it's interesting to see the frustration that Ross and Larson had. But again, it sounds like that Larson has moved on from the incident and moved on from the situation. And now Larson just focusing on trying to win Cup Series races. And I think Ross Chastain's out there to do that as well. Ross Chastain basically just needs to basically embrace his side of being aggressive overall. In my opinion, I think Chastain just needs to start embracing it. And again, Larson, I'm glad to see that he's kind of moved on from the situation, is moving on to try to compete for NASCAR Cup Series victories because he almost won the Cup Series race yesterday. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain. As Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain, they had some tempers out on the racetrack down the backstretch. Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain had a little bit of contact going into turn number 3, and they were frustrated with each other. And there was contact out on the racetrack. And we know that Kyle Busch has bashed Ross Chastain in the past. Kyle Busch was speaking on the radio, and he was not happy with Ross Chastain about the racing that he was putting on. Basically kind of calling him, saying that you're warning, and Kyle Busch was not very happy with Ross Chastain. Now, like I said, Kyle Busch has had a history with Ross Chastain in the past. You go back to basically Richmond last year, both of them had some tension. I think Ross Chastain unfortunately clipped Kyle Busch going into turn number 4 in a summer race at Richmond, and Kyle Busch was not happy about that. Then Dakota, Kyle Busch kind of made a backwards comment at Ross Chastain, basically saying this guy doesn't know anything clean about racing here. And then now you have this incident between Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain. Now, to be fair to Ross Chastain, Kyle Busch, after basically getting wrecked out of the race after crashing hard on the inside wall, Kyle Busch spoke to the media, and he said that he's not just blaming Ross Chastain, and he said there were a lot of drivers that were really, really aggressive and frustrated with him. Again, I think a lot of drivers have been frustrated with Ross Chastain over the last year or two, and have shown their intense frustration at Ross Chastain over the last year or two. So I can't blame him for being upset and frustrated Kyle Busch, because he had a really good day going, and then he had a bad day at the end of the day, but it seemed like Kyle Busch was not completely going after Ross Chastain in the incident. That being said, though, it's interesting to see that Kyle Busch is frustrated with Ross Chastain. But what's new at this point? It seems like Kyle Busch, even though he's been less frustrated driving Richmond Racing, he seems like when it's around Ross Chastain, he seems to be a lot more frustrated out on the racetrack. Not surprised by that frustration, but again, it's interesting to see the frustration he had right there. Very interesting stuff. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson. Now, if you did not watch the end of this NASCAR Cup Series race, you missed out on one of the all-time classic finishes in NASCAR history, because Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson put on a really good show over the last 10 or 15 laps. Denny Hamlin obviously had the faster car than Kyle Larson, and Larson's car was starting to get loose near the end of the race. As we're coming to white flag, Denny Hamlin was about 0.2 of a second back behind Kyle Larson. And Kyle Larson, going turn number 1, had the race lead. And he was going to try to use the high line to beat Denny Hamlin off the corner. Well, unfortunately for Kyle Larson, his car got loose, and he got tight and got into the outside wall, very much similar to what he did last year when battling Kurt Busch for the victory. And Kyle Larson basically bounced off in the outside wall. Larson came back down, and Denny Hamlin, I don't think intentionally, but he ran into the back of Kyle Larson and put him into the outside wall. Larson miraculously saved this car, and they basically still end up finishing second in race, and Denny Hamlin will come off the corner and pick up his first win in 2023 and his 49th career NASCAR Cup Series victory. Now, a lot of people had their opinions on the fight, on the move, and for about 20 seconds, I was really, really mad at Denny Hamlin. But if you want my opinion, I'm not mad at Denny Hamlin for the move. Yes, it might be a little dirty to a lot of people. It may have been a little dirty to me, but I think that's just hard racing going for a win. And both Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson are really good friends, and both of them have battled each other over the years time and time again. You go back to the 2021 Southern 500, you go back to the other races that these two have battled against each other. And Denny Hamlin's even said that he thinks that Kyle Larson is one of the greatest drivers ever. And Denny Hamlin has said that Kyle Larson is going to win more races than I ever have. And I've got to take advantage in every opportunity that I get. And Denny Hamlin, let's be honest, even though he's getting close to signing a contract extension with Gibbs Racing, he is certainly getting closer and closer to the end of his NASCAR Cup Series career. So he's got to try to have as many opportunities and take advantage of any opportunity that he gets racing in the Cup Series, going for wins, and he's going to have chances time and time again of going for victories. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see long-term what happens. Larson didn't seem too mad and frustrated because, again, he had not seen a replay. But, again, they're going for the win. They're battling for the win, and you're going to have contact out on the racetrack at times. So even if Larson's pissed and frustrated, it was a great finish nonetheless, and I enjoyed yesterday's race, and we had a fantastic and killer finish at the end of the race. An absolutely amazing race. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about 2311 Racing. Now, obviously, Legacy Motor Club, they're going to be switching Toyota in 2023. There's been a lot of rumors and rumblings about 2311 Racing if they're going to be basically expanding next year in 2024. Well, it sounds like right now that 2311 Racing will not be expanding to 3 full-time cars in 2024. This is very interesting considering there have been rumors and rumblings about 2311 potentially expanding in 2024 to a 3rd full-time car. Now, that is not saying that 2311 Racing could have a 3rd car in 2024 for a driver like Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch, obviously, he's trying to get back behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup Series car. He has not been medically cleared to race at this particular point, but we've seen the 3rd 2311 Racing car. They have prepared for Kurt Busch whenever he does decide to return, but right now they're not planning to expand to 3 full-time cars. And a lot of that has to do with the charter system. Charters are extremely expensive currently at the moment right now. they're not the only team that's trying to get in the Cup Series and expand. You got Junior Motorsports has been rumored for the last 2 or 3 years, quintessentially, and they're trying to get up to the Cup Series currently at the moment right now. But again, there's a lot of talk if they're trying to get a charter, but charters right now are very expensive. They're around the $30 million range currently at the moment right now. So they're extremely expensive, and you need a lot of money if you're going to end up getting a charter in the Cup Series field. Again, I do think 23XI will have a third car on a part-time basis next year. It will either be Kurt Busch behind the wheel of that car when Kurt does officially get medically cleared to get back behind the wheel of a Cup Series car, or someone else like maybe like a Sammy Smith gets an opportunity, a chance with the team. Maybe Travis Pastrana makes his return. Maybe other drivers in the Toyota camp get an opportunity like a John Hunter Nemechek who has driven for 23XI Racing in the past. Who knows at this particular point what's going to end up happening, but nonetheless, 23XI Racing will not have 3 full-time cars in the 2024 season, which isn't a shocking surprise, but it sounds like they will at least have a third part-time car next year, and I think Kurt Busch will be the driver in that car if he gets medically cleared. I think he will get medically cleared in the future, and nonetheless, it sounds like they are trying to eventually get a third car full-time. I think long-term they're going to have a third full-time car, but right now they won't have a third full-time car, and they'll have 8 full-time entries, and Jimmy Johnson, of course, sounds like could run part-time with Legacy next year, but nonetheless, 23XI Racing will not expand to 3 full-time cars in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Noah Gragson and Ross Chastain fight. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race yesterday, you saw the Noah Gragson and Ross Chastain fight. So I believe in stage 2, near the end of stage number 2 or the beginning of stage number 3, Ross Chastain and Noah Gragson had a disagreement out on the racetrack. Ross Chastain basically kind of forced Noah Gragson up into the outside wall with this dirty air. Gragson hits the outside wall, and Noah Gragson was not very happy with Ross Chastain when that happened. He tried to come back down and retaliate on Ross Chastain down the straightaway, which would have been a very, very bad look. After the NASCAR Cup Series race, Noah Gragson went up to confront Ross Chastain and basically said, "What is your problem?" Ross Chastain basically said, "I was really, really, really fast," and basically said, "You kind of pushed me in the outside wall." Well, both Noah Gragson then eventually grabs Ross Chastain by the collars, and Ross Chastain says a couple times, "Stop, stop." And then eventually, Ross Chastain basically says, "You know what?" He finally snaps and hits Noah Gragson square in the face and hits him basically with a sucker punch. Noah Gragson tries to basically retaliate and get back into Ross Chastain, basically hit him with a couple fists, but basically, you had a bunch of security guards that are hired by NASCAR holding Noah Gragson back. If they didn't hold Noah Gragson back, and I really do wish they would have not held Noah Gragson back, because I think Noah Gragson could have gone in there and landed a few square hits on Ross Chastain. Even Tyler Reddick would agree with me that basically they should have let the security guards out of the way and let both drivers end up fighting. After that ended up happening, Noah Gragson basically spoke to the media, and he says he's gotten sick and tired of being raced with the disrespect. He likes to track out his team, but he's not a big fan of Ross Chastain. He's sick and tired of it. He said all these drivers basically talk about, like Chastain and Denny Hamlin say, that he needs to get his ass kicked, and Noah Gragson said, "You know what, I'm going to be the guy to go out there and go kick their ass," quintessentially there. And again, I can't blame Noah Gragson being frustrated, upset. Ross Chastain all spoke to media after the situation. He's gotten tied off turn 4, and he understands Noah Gragson being frustrated and upset. And Ross Chastain basically said, "You don't want to mess with me." Look, Ross Chastain told him 2 or 3 times, "Stop, stop." And then Ross Chastain finally had enough. Ross Chastain's got that farmer power. If you mess with Ross Chastain, he's going to come back and basically fight you. We haven't seen Ross Chastain really fight anybody recently. We know there was rumors he fought, I think, Brendan Gaughan back in 2017. But again, Ross Chastain, Noah Gragson, no doubt, had every right to be frustrated and upset. He was having his best run of the year. He had been contending for a top 10 a lot of the day and was having a very strong and great run. I wish that security guard would not have gone out of the way, and I do appreciate Noah Gragson going out and confronting him. And again, we need drivers like Ross Chastain in the sport for sure. He's a guy who really, really brings a lot of storylines. And as much as I've criticized Ross Chastain for his aggressive style of racing, you got to appreciate Ross Chastain for creating a lot of awesome and fantastic storylines, because he creates all those amazing and great storylines overall. I think that yesterday's fight was really, really fun to watch. It was a little more lame because I wish they would have let the security guards get out of the way. So I want to see both of them get into a really, really big fight and a confrontation, because it would have been really, really fun to see and really, really awesome to watch. So I wish that the security guards would have gotten out of the way, but nonetheless, it was great to see a fight. First fight of the year so far, and really great to see a fight finally happen A lot of drivers have been frustrated with Chastain, people confronting him, and it's finally about time that someone ended up confronting Chastain right there. I expected it to happen, but nonetheless, it finally ended up happening. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about the Darlington Fox booth for the throwback weekend. As this weekend, there's a lot of big personalities joining the Fox Sports booth for this weekend. In stage number one, both Richard Petty and Kyle Petty will be joining the Fox Sports booth in stage number one. Richard Petty is obviously one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time. He actually was in the Fox booth in last year's Darlington race, and Kyle Petty works with NASCAR on NBC. Probably got granted the rights to go over and work with NASCAR on Fox in stage number one. Stage number two, though, is extremely exciting because Carl Edwards, yes, heard that right, Carl Edwards is going to be joining the Fox Sports booth along with Bill Elliott. First of all, really excited that Bill Elliott's going to be joining the Fox Sports booth, but Carl Edwards is the main guy I want to talk about here. Carl Edwards in the last week or two has been in the spotlight over the last week or two. First thing, he was announced to be in the top 75 greatest NASCAR drivers of all time about a week or two ago. And Carl Edwards indicated that he was planning to visit the Trackhouse Racing shop. Now, he said he's not going to be returning behind the wheel, but it's interesting over the last week or two that he has been in the spotlight. Now, obviously, Carl Edwards is going to be honored in the top 75 greatest drivers of all time, and that's why Carl Edwards is going to probably be at the racetrack a lot more consistently. But it is very amazing here Carl Edwards is actually going to be in the Fox Sports booth for many reasons. Number one, it's going to be really awesome to hear his voice. And maybe he'll give us an update on a potential return to NASCAR, because there's been a lot of rumors and rumors, and maybe there's a potential return for Carl Edwards to the NASCAR Cup Series. But also, Carl Edwards, I think, when you go back to watch some of the commentaries that he's done with ESPN back in the day, in the late 2000s and early 2010s, especially the 2013 race at Talladega he did in the Xfinity Series, he did an amazing job. Carl Edwards is one of the greatest personalities in NASCAR history, and I think he's going to do an amazing and incredible job in the Fox Sports booth this upcoming week. And it's going to be so great to hear Carl Edwards' voice once again. Growing up as a fan of the sport, Carl Edwards was one of my favorite drivers, not only from Chesterfield, Missouri, which isn't far from where I live, but Carl Edwards did an amazing and a fantastic job and really represented Missouri in a massive, massive way, and one of the most successful drivers that ever came out of Missouri. Yes, Rusty Wallace was the greatest driver from Missouri, but you have Carl Edwards, who's a close second. Just an amazing personality and a great driver for the sport as well. And it's been many, many years since we've heard Carl Edwards' voice. He's shown up time and time again. He was a coach for Daniel Suarez in 2017. He worked with other drivers in the sport for about a year or two after. Kind of came back in the spotlight about a year or two in 2021. It's just going to be fantastic. Carl Edwards back in the spotlight. It's been a long time, and I'm just so happy here that Carl Edwards is going to be in the Fox Sports Week because, again, I think he's going to do an amazing and incredible job. And I really hope he comes back one day and races a couple times or two, because it's been a long time since he's been behind the wheel of a Cup Series car. And again, we all agree that it's just been way too long since Carl Edwards has been behind the wheel of a Cup Series car. We really want to see him back, and I miss Carl Edwards so much. So to hear that he's going to be in the Fox booth, when I heard that yesterday, he was going to be in the booth, I almost cried. I genuinely almost cried, because it's been so long since he's been in the Fox Sports booth. He's been a long time since he's been behind the wheel. We all miss him. We miss him dearly, and I hope that Carl Edwards someday does come back to race. Just one race. We all want you to come back for one race, Carl. Please, Carl, come back for one race. I don't care what team you run for. Go and race this year, please. We almost thought you were coming back earlier this year with 2311 Racing. But just hear that he's going to be back in the Fox Sports booth is amazing. It is incredible. And I'm excited to hear he's going to be back in the spotlight once again, because I think he's going to do an amazing and incredible job. And I'm definitely looking forward to see Carl Edwards back in NASCAR and commentating the Fox race. He's going to do, I think, a great and an awesome job, in my honest opinion. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Newman. As it was announced on Friday that Ryan Newman is officially returning to NASCAR in 2023. He will drive for Rickmore Racing for 5 races in 2023. He will make his first start this weekend at Darlington. Then will run the Southern 500. Then he's going to run the All-Star race. Then I believe he's going to run Michigan. And then he's going to run Bristol in the fall as well. This is really, really awesome and exciting news. I can't remember if he's going to be running the 15 or the 51 car this weekend. But Ryan Newman has not been in the NASCAR Cup Series since 2021 when he drove for Roush Fenway Racing. Before they became RFK Racing, he drove the number 6 car. And while Ryan Newman struggled in 2021, Ryan Newman basically had indicated, and there's been rumors and rumblings over the last couple weeks that he may be returning. But when I heard this news, I was absolutely pumped up and absolutely excited because I think this is a massive pickup for Ricker Racing for those 5 races. And this will be the first time Ryan Newman has competed in a next-gen car. But I think Ryan Newman will be pretty competitive with Ricker Racing. I'm not saying Ryan Newman is going to come down there at Ricker Racing and he's going to instantly win. But I would not be surprised or shocked if you see Ryan Newman contend for maybe some top 20s or even some top 25s. Yes, like I said, Ryan Newman lacks a lot of next-gen experience, and everyone that's running in the Cup Series has a lot more next-gen experience than him. But if there's anybody that can make those Ricker Racing cars a lot stronger, it's definitely been Ryan Newman. And you look at what Ricker Racing has been doing. They hired Tommy Baldwin as a competition director for the team, which I think has helped their performance. You look at their performance, especially with Brennan Poole and J.J. Lee the last couple weeks, and their performance has generally been a lot better out on the racetrack. And it's just, to hear that Ryan Newman is coming back is incredible and joins a list of drivers who have returned in the next-gen era. Jimmy Johnson has come back, and he'll be likely running a Toyota next year with Legacy, but he's come back out of retirement and done some races. There's been other drivers that rumored have been interested in doing a next-gen race. Even Tony Stewart at one point I don't know if he was joking or not, but Tony Stewart indicated on a broadcast he was very interested in maybe making a return one day running like Bristol Dirt or another race. But I think this is a huge pickup for Ricker Racing, and I think this is going to really make Ricker Racing a much stronger organization. My expectations is I think Ryan Newman will contend for top 20s and top 25s out on the track. I think he will be a better performing driver, Rick Ware. We saw Ryan Preece did in this car last year, competing for top 20s, and I wonder if Stewart-Haas Racing is going to continue, even though Stewart-Haas Racing doesn't have the reliance. And if you think about it more, it makes a lot of sense too, because the last team Brad Keselowski drove for was Ryan Newman drove for was basically Roush Fenway, and of course RK has the alliance with Ricker Racing now, so it makes a lot of sense. And you know Ryan Newman's been racing. He competed in the SRX full-time. I think he's going to be back full-time in the SRX as well. But just hear that Ryan Newman will be competing in select NASCAR Cup Series races and competing this season, I think is phenomenal, and I think it's going to be very, very exciting. I think he's going to be extremely competitive. I think he's going to do really, really well, and I think he is going to help Ricker Racing. He's got engineering experience, something that a lot of drivers in NASCAR don't really have, and I think that's going to be a huge key in really making Ricker Racing a pretty strong organization. But you've had drivers come into NASCAR who've been interested, Lewis Hamilton especially recently. You've got drivers who've come from different disciplines. You know, Jenson Button. We've had Romain Grosjean interested. Shane Van Gisbergen is heavily rumored right now. And I think a lot, and Gray Biffle's come out of retirement too. I think a lot of it right now is just the fact that you have a lot of drivers interested in this next-gen car for other disciplines and other forms of racing, and even drivers coming out of retirement that you never thought would have happened. To see that Ryan Newman is coming back, though, is phenomenal. It's incredible, and I'm definitely pumped up and excited to see that Ryan Newman is making his official return to NASCAR. I think he's going to do an amazing and incredible job, and I'm looking forward to see Ryan Newman officially back in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2023. It's going to be first time racing since 2021. It's been a few years, nonetheless, so I'm so excited to see Ryan Newman make his official return. So, that is going to be for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below with that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's video. How excited are you to see Ryan Newman make his official return to NASCAR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Carl Legler's joining the Fox Sports booth, and do you think he'll ever return to NASCAR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later this evening, we'll have the NASCAR Truck Series race picks for the upcoming race at Darlington. Then tomorrow on the channel, we should have Xfinity Series race picks on the channel and probably a special video dropping on the channel as well. Then on Wednesday, we have a NASCAR news video and an all-look at all the throwback paint schemes that have been revealed. Then on Thursday, will be race picks for the Cup Series race at Darlington Raceway. Then on Friday, we'll have a NASCAR news video and the Truck Series race review, and a lot of content on the way as well that I think you're going to enjoy over the next 2 weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content. I'm trying to reach 2,500 subscribers by the end of the year and 1 million views, so if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to like it and share this video out as well. I'll see you guys for more awesome content. Take care, everybody.